Thank you everyone for coming today. As I know it's very early on Saturday morning, so well done to everyone and me, myself. Well, thank you. Kudos to you guys. So thank you so much for joining us as the first interwave with the great support from Broadway Foundation for the space and many, many other things, and also New Earth Theatre to join us as well. I feel like it's quite a unique opportunity for us to really draw focus on the potentiality between UK and Asian arts. So today is sort of like a conference symposium style, consists with three really focused panels, kind of like shed lights on between different contexts in terms of how art is produced, how art and sit or perceive in different contexts. When I say context, is in culturally, geographically, social and politically, and many, many other layers. And also how art is how art is moving. So yeah, so hopefully by the end of today, we will also have at least take one things we didn't know before away. And also, I think it's really good opportunity to kind of like for us to. I know there's a lot of familiar faces here, but also it's a good way to make new connections. So I would definitely encourage you to meet somebody you don't know before. Hopefully, as a goal by the end of today. So that is everything. So you all been when you enter, you all been briefing about the space. But if you have not familiar with all the stuff around. New Earth, Belgrade, and us, Kakilang. So if you have any question, please feel free to ask us. And also we will have some documentation, so been photo taken throughout the day. So if there's any issue you have that, please come to talk to us and we will try to sort it out as well. And then I think that's it from the whole thing. So I'm gonna pass on as the first panel. Yeah.
Hi everybody, lovely to meet you. I'm Ruth and I work with Kakilang with Hal in the co-CEO role and have got quite a long history with the organisation also when it was called Chinese Arts Now. It's really amazing that you could join us all today, so thank you. I'd just like to introduce our panel, starting with Yi, who's online. I'm not sure where Yi is at the moment. Oh, there we go.
Me?
Skander, Hal, and Masoom. So I think we'll just start. You've got their biogs, which I think you've received all the information online, so I won't do that. But if you do want to pick their brains about anything relating to their biogs, please do. But I think we'll just launch into the presentations. Yi, would you like to go first?
Sure. Let me try to share my screen. Can you see it?
No. Oh yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh my god, I'm really this technology thing is not for me. But you can all see it now, right?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god. Okay, great. So hi everyone. My name is Yi Wang. I'm currently in Taiwan, but usually I'm based in London. It's just unfortunately I can't join you guys in person today, and but it's very nice to have this opportunity to meet you all virtually, and I would just like to very briefly talk a little bit about Queer East, especially for those who are just new to us. So as you can see here, I'm trying to find my slide actually because I can't see it. But as you can see here, so Queer East is a cross-disciplinary festival that showcases LGBTQ plus cinema, live arts, and movie image works from East and Southeast Asia and its diaspora communities. The festival was started in 2020 during pandemic. So we are like a pandemic baby, and it's now we just finished our 7th edition. So I just want to talk a little bit about myself, as I come from sort of a slightly different background in terms of my relationship with performing arts or films. I was majored in political science actually when I was in Taiwan, and in 2014, I went to London and did my master degree in brands and communication and culture, which is sort of a media and communication degree. And so prior to that, I didn't really have a lot of experience in terms of performing arts, producing, or films. But after I graduated, I started work for another performing arts producer, mainly focused on international touring with British and European theater and dance companies for their Asian tour. So we tour a lot of productions from Europe to China mainly, also Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan as well. And that's sort of like where I start my relationship with performing arts. And after several years of working in the sector, in around 2019, I sort of started to have this idea of creating a film festival. It was actually come from a very selfish reasons, I would say, but it's just like back then I already spent around 7 years in London, but I didn't really get a lot of opportunity to see East and Southeast Asian queer cinema. And that's why I sort of decided to start to my journey with Queer East. And these are sort of the 4 questions that I would always like to invite my audience to have a think as well in terms of your personal relationship with East and Southeast Asian queer films. When was the last time you saw an East and Southeast Asian queer film? What was it about? And when was the film made? And where did you watch it? So these sort of 4 questions sort of related to my personal observations that at the beginning when I decided to create Queer East. So the first is visibility. So as you know, Asians are one of the fast growing ethnic groups in the UK. But it seems like we kind of still lack an understanding about them, except from a very few rare appearance in blockbuster. We often don't see a lot of Asian representation, and not to mention films about queer Asian communities, who I feel like is sort of in the stubborn, marginalized position by their race and also sexuality, which result in them to sort of being excluded from the mainstream discourse. And the second is relevance. So when it comes to queer Asian cinema, there are many classic films that we talk about and adore. For example, Wong Kar-wai's Happy Together. I know the Pride Month just passed, so just imagine how many cinemas were screening Happy Together, which of course is a brilliant film, but it's also a film that made over 25 years ago in Argentina. And not just Happy Together as a case, we also see a lot of queer Asian classics are being repeatedly screened in the big screen, which there's nothing wrong about it. And also like these are obviously brilliant films. But I also feel like apart from these, we also need to see films that are more current, are more urgent, and are more relevant to us. That represents the life experience of queer people living in today's society. And the third one is authenticity. So far too often we see a lot of queer Asian characters are portrayed as a group of sufferers who are trapped by social oppressions and traditional cultural norms, which in a way may be true for some people, unfortunately. But I also feel like joy and happiness are also part of our experience of being queer. And we need to bring more sort of more different stories from different perspectives and give queer Asian characters a more three-dimensional narrative. And the fourth one is accessibility. So from my personal experience back then, a lot of these events, screenings related to the topic about East and Southeast Asian queer cultures and arts were usually held on the university campuses run by academics with research interest in queer or Asian cinema. I found it quite difficult to sort of find these events beyond academic settings. And that's why I also think it's really important that we offer and opportunities for the public to have a chance to explore, discover, and decide if they would like to sort of engage with these East and Southeast Asian queer films. So this sort of then became my motivation to start it Queer East. And so from 2020, a very hectic pandemic year, the festival has been running since then, and we just concluded our 7th edition back in June. And here you can see some photos of our events. As you can see that we don't just do film screenings. We always trying to. I will talk a little bit about this a little bit later about our new sort of artist direction and expansion. But as you can see here, that we always trying to go beyond film screening by engaging audience with different formats of events. So you can see we have a lot of Q&As. We have performances last day in between screenings. And you can also see that there's a lot of events that took place in non-conventional settings, community centers, independent underground art spaces are all places that we will use to host our events. And a little bit about the organization side. So Queer East is majority funded by the BFI through the National Lottery Fund. For those who are more familiar with the Arts Fund, then which National Lottery is also the main funding source for the Arts Council funding as well. It's just like the BFI handle the film park side. And also beyond the film BFI funding, we also receive sort of slightly long-term funding from the City of Westminster Council, which they support Queer East to sort of have a bit of capacity running events beyond the festival circuit. And the festival has showcased over 800 films from 29 countries. We work with over 50 venues across 27 cities that include in the UK, but also beyond the UK, such as Berlin, Amsterdam, and also several Asian cities as well. And we've worked with over 124 partners, like including funding partners, cultural partners, and venue partners. So this is sort of a very general overview of the festival and the organization. And I would like to talk a little bit about how, when, and why we decided to sort of rebrand and move the festival from a film-focused festival to a more multidisciplinary festival that involve performances, live arts, and many different art forms. And I think the first would definitely because myself come from a performing arts producer background, so it's quite an organic sort of transition for me as someone who runs the festival to include more different formats to the festival. But I would also say that this is a very audience and community informed decision that over the first 3 years of the festival that we received so many feedback from the audience that they want to see more beyond films and they want to have more live elements within the festival as well. So that's why we sort of decided to start include performance into the festival back in 2023. And the other thinking is also that I would like to show audience different forms to engage screen content. So you will see a lot of our events that involve performative sort of elements in the festival. They are sort of always engaged with screen content. So we always try to think how we can bring different live elements to the audience during their film watching experience. So for example, we have a sauna screening that people watch film together, then have sauna together after the screening. We have sort of immersive BDSM screening as well that audience get tied up on their chairs. And we also have a very vanilla sort of a garden walk screening as well that we talk about queer nature. And so all sort of ways to trying to encourage audience to engage the screen format. And the third thinking is actually I want to bring more international artists and companies to the UK because I know due to the funding constraints, a lot of issues that we are seeing less and less international performances. Companies are present in London, and I would like to play part of that. Even we are a very small organization, but we're still trying to bring sort of all these different elements to the audience during the festival. So our performance partners are include Barbican, The Place, ICA, and Battersea Center, which are sort of the main venues that host our performances. And so over the past sort of 4 years now, we've introduced companies from Singapore, China, Taiwan to perform in London with dance, theaters, plays as well. And I'm aware of the time, so I will speed it up a little bit. I just want to talk about our new sort of artist direction to move the festival towards a more collaborative curation and programming model. So this comes from my personal experience as well, that I've been spending a lot of time to think what is queer art and what is queer art for today's audience. And I also encounter a lot of invitation as well as someone who is a Taiwanese immigrant, who is a cis man, and who probably don't really have a lot of experience and knowledge about things beyond my personal lived experience. And that's why I'm trying to create this more decentralized programming approach in the festival to challenge the traditional sort of a curator-centered festival programming model. So since 3 years ago, I started to invite different guest curators who I encounter through my work or who are recommended by people I trust and or who just submit it through our open call to sort of invite them to be part of the festival and contribute their creative minds and perspective on queerness and Asianness to the festival. So what we usually do is we give them a budget for their curation and also give them a producing budget for them to produce their events in the festival. And for these kind of events that we are trying to encourage them to think beyond the box. So we don't want those traditional film screenings or traditional performers. We're always trying to encourage them to think different artist formats and elements that can sort of facilitate a new perspective and new understanding about East and Southeast Asian queer communities. And so I have been doing these over the past 3 years. And just a case here that this is what we present this year with ICA. So it's a 4-day takeover at the ICA in their theater and also cinema, which I work with amazing Singaporean artist and curator Bar Song Wong. And so Bart So I worked with Bart to curate this entire 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. program that involves 6 international performance artists and dancers to present their works at the ICA Theatre. It also comes alongside with 5 workshops led by different artists, and then a rave party at the end, a looping film program. So this is also sort of something that I'm really interested these days of trying to expanding the program at Queer East. And obviously the next step will be the program expansion at Queer East, diversify our income stream, and reworking our organization structure. So that's all from me. And thank you so much. I'm looking at the time. Thank you.
I forgot to say the name of this panel at the start, so I'm really sorry for that. I'm assuming you've all got the schedule, but just to reiterate, this panel is Beyond Representation, Building Sustainable East and Southeast Asian and South Asian Cultural Futures. So Iskander is our next person to speak.
Do I need a microphone?
I think it's good for our recording,
Yeah.
If you could try to stick to 10 minutes, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. I sort of arrived today in the Central Mosque is around the corner. I had a slight trauma response as a young Muslim boy because I'm not a very good Muslim anymore, so I don't need to say that. My name is Iskander, so I'm going to speak, I'll sort of, I don't know, what am I going to do? I'm going to oscillate between being quite personal and then talking on behalf of a colleague who I run a theatre company with, and the two of us. So I'll sort of go between those two things. So, and you'll forgive me because I'm literally going to read. My name is Iskander, and I'm the joint artistic director, I don't know what that means, but of an unsubsidized project-to-project theatre company called Orlando Productions. My fellow artistic director is Mingyu Lin, who some of you may know, who is now based in York, and she's the resident artist at York Theatre Royal. I'm currently the associate director of My Neighbor Totoro for the RSC and Studio Ghibli with Eileen, who is on the call but not present. And for the last 4 years, I was the associate at Headlong Theatre, where I had a focus on building national scale projects in community arts and participatory practice. Headlong is one of the largest, if not the largest, touring organisation that works in new writing and commissioning new writing and reimagining in quite a radical way classics. I'm not really here to talk about Headlong, but what that does mean is that Ming and I both have a deep familiarity and understanding of what it means to work in larger national portfolio organisations. And that formed some of the thinking as to why we didn't become an NPO, or never applied. And it also means that both of us have sat in positions as cultural programmers or in organisations as cultural programmers or, in quotation marks, gatekeepers. I don't think I've ever been a gatekeeper, but you sometimes find yourself in those positions. The company was initially a vehicle for self-generating work, but it fast became an organisation or a company that predominantly supported early career artists, lots of debut playwrights and makers to present their first work. Our relationship with the company sort of predates our relationship. It was actually an organisation in Western Australia where I went to high school and spent my formative years and started my creative career. And the company there was supported by Australia Council for the Arts and the state government of Western Australia. But I moved back to the UK and we sort of started it up here. I just want to talk about the first work that we produced, which I think was formative in sort of shaping how we wanted to work moving forward in terms of work with artists of Asian diaspora and communities. The first piece that we made was a play which I wrote, which was called Silently Hoping. And it was a semi-autobiographical piece of work about an ethnically mixed and culturally queer Muslim person who was on the cusp of 30 and tussling with existential questions. I'm probably still tussling with those existential questions about how to reconcile like a sense of modernity with Islam and being British. That was a really difficult space for me to exist in. The work was supported by Arts Council England, and we presented it at Vault Festival, which, for those of you that remember it or know it, I think is probably sorely missed in the London theatre ecosystem. But it was a bit, for those that don't know, it was like a precursor to Edinburgh in the tunnels underneath Waterloo Station in the Leake Street Tunnel. But when we presented this show, which I was deeply proud of, and actually we did a panel discussion like this, which was also started with the word beyond. It was the panel was Beyond Taxi Drivers and Terrorists, and it was about the representation of Muslims in the UK. When we presented it, I sort of probably realised too late that actually inviting one of our core demographic sort of audience, our target audience, who were millennium Muslims, a lot like me, asking them to come into a dark tunnel underneath, Waterloo Station that was very crowded and full of bars. I was like, that's really not working. And so we sort of felt like we didn't have a relationship with one of the core audience groups that we wanted to connect with. And so we took the show to a community, well, Clarissa was there, but we took the show to a space that Clarissa was working in, which was a community centre and also had a community mosque as a part of it. And we presented the show there, and we felt that the play was able to naturally, obviously, meet its audience and grow in a way that was really fertile and exciting. And at the same time, we started to work with a bunch of local young boys in Newham, who were black and brown young boys in Newham, some of whom were Muslim, to sort of co-author a play about themselves. And I guess that whole experience really shaped mine and Ming's intention of how we wanted to work with one another and the communities who were at the core, the emotional stakeholders of the stories that we wanted to tell. And then something strange happened, which was we found ourselves on the receiving end of a lot of artists sending us emails and plays. At the time, Kakilang, which was Chinese Arts Now, and New Earth, which was Yellow Earth, they've both gone through a rebranding. They were these organisations at the pinnacle of EC or Asian diaspora stories. But as was then, and as is the case now, and I don't want to speak for those organisations, but they have limited resource, and we found ourselves looking at our immediate surroundings and realising that there were precious few early career producers who were in a position to meet early career artists and support them at that sort of grassroots level. There was Clarissa, which was great. So we fell into a place of advocacy and artist activism totally by accident, and then felt ourselves shouldered with a responsibility that we sort of try to and continue to sort of meet that responsibility today. And what that looked like at the time and what it sometimes still looks like now is like free consultation, one-to-one dramaturgical advice, writing a for these artists that haven't got a clue, and then in some respects, straight up writing funding bids and line producing their work. Sometimes underneath the umbrella of the company, sometimes people don't know that we produced that work. And for us at the time, we had this conversation. I remember we had a really specific conversation. I sit at the intersection of a few identities. Obviously, I've spoken about being Muslim. My grandparents come from Mansehra. They left British India, which was actually would be Pakistan now, in the 1930s before partition, and arrived in Labuan and then went to Brunei. So I grew up in Southeast Asia on that side of the world, and obviously Ming is Singaporean, and so we both felt at the time that we wanted to make sure that there was a dialogue or conversation with our work and the work that we were doing outside of it, with an East Southeast Asian identity and a South Asian identity. And so Ming and I both work for organisations like Tamasha or Sampad, and that was kind of critical because I suppose we felt like there was a narrative that we were stronger in cross-cultural solidarity between an East Southeast Asian identity and a South Asian identity, and you know, the collaborative nature or the conversation between those two communities goes a little way to addressing some of the sort of continued dehumanization and erasure of both of those communities. Maybe one of the most important, I've run out, my thing's not loaded the rest of my speech, so I'm just gonna do this. One of the sort of most important, I think, what am I doing for time? Am I all right?
Yeah, I'd say another 4 minutes.
Yeah, got it. You can do that. Perhaps one of the most sort of important pieces of work for us was a play by Joel Tan called No Particular Order, which we produced in 2022 at Theatre 503. And Joel is a Singaporean playwright. The play was largely funded by National Arts Council Singapore. We sort of had to lie to Singapore because it was a piece about an authoritarian state and you know, a thinly veiled metaphor for Singapore. But they still funded it, so we sort of had to just gently not tell them the entire nature of the story. But we did, and we put our own money in. We stamped up a lot of cash as a company from our own reserves. And I guess, and I think it's important to mention, we didn't get Arts Council England funding after going through many rounds, you know, and that funding model is broken, and that's a separate conversation. But it also was apparent to us, and I suppose remains apparent, that it was not a priority with the venues or programmers that we were talking to and the funding bodies that we're having a conversation with to fund Asian diaspora or East Southeast Asian work on main stages. And that is a big sweeping generalization of a statement, but that is really what we felt at the time. And so we wanted to put our own money into that show and also lie to Singapore National Arts Council and get some of their money. And Joel is an extraordinary playwright, and for us it was really important that we produced, or not even that we produced, but that he had a full-length play on a stage in London at one of, you know, arguably one of the most important new writing venues that is a pipeline for writers to go on to do bigger things. And we really wanted to be a part of that journey. Look, Joel would have been recognised as a playwright that is extraordinary without us at all. He didn't need us. And after that, or at the same time, he picked up commissions with the Royal Court, the Almeida, and actually at Headlong, we then commissioned him. So we sort of pushed to commission him. He would have done that anyway, but I think I like to think that we were a contributing factor in that journey, and there was a part of us that supported that journey, and Joel entering the fabric of the consciousness of sort of the London theatre ecosystem, and that underpins a lot of what we were doing in terms of going, okay, so here are the early career artists, or here are the emerging practitioners, here are the venues that, you know, we can feasibly, as an unsubsidized company, support them in. Theatre 503, Vault Festival doesn't exist, Camden People's Theatre, places like this, because without investing and it was a risk, but without investing at that front end in those artists, I don't believe that we can have a sustainable cultural future. And we just found ourselves in a place when very precious few other people were doing that. And then I guess at the same time that we sort of started to really fixate on what that journey was for us, we have separate freelance careers that selfishly are about us. We found ourselves in, like I said, programming positions within larger organizations, whether that was at Headlong, and we commissioned Joel, and then we commissioned AJ Yee after A Playlist for the Revolution at the Bush, which was their first bigger commission. Or Ming ended up moving into television, which makes a lot more money. And she presented the first Southeast Asian family on a British soap with a series of episodes on Hollyoaks about Lunar New Year. So we sort of found ourselves in those positions, and then alongside the advocacy and work that we were doing with younger and emerging practitioners, wanted to use those positions of leverage to try and push the needle. And in respect of all the people and all the artists that have pushed the needle before us and allowed us to flourish with a sense of community, because I think we do flourish when we find a sense of community, that formed the staple of our intention, I guess, as we stepped through. How am I doing? Done?
I think so.
Nailed it.
Thank you, Masoon, over to you.
Can I have the keyboard here? Sorry, I'm a bit of a control freak. I need to control the slides. Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name is Masoom. I lead Akash Suridra Company's programs in India, among other things. But I've come to this conversation from Bangalore, where I also run an arts management company called Aleph. And I want to use a few minutes to offer something slightly different today, which is the view from the other end of the exchange. Most of the conversations about Asian arts in the UK happen entirely inside the UK. And I would like to describe what this looks from the other side of the table. Great, sorry. So when a British South Asian company is discussed here, the frame usually is representation, whether the work is visible, whether it's funded, whether it's understood. But from India, and I guess from Asia, the frame is entirely different. Nobody in Bangalore or Chennai asks whether Akash Suridra Company's work represents South Asia. They ask whether it's good. They ask what it's doing to the forms. They watch a dancer trained in Kathak, making contemporary work in Leicester, and they recognize a conversation, not a representation. The difference in the frame, I think, is useful to this room. Because here's what I want to insist on. The relationship between British South Asian performance and the subcontinent is not a diaspora looking back at a homeland. It's a living, continuing artistic conversation. The forms Akash trained in are not a heritage to be preserved. These are contemporary practices, argued over, reinvented, and taught every day in India by artists who consider themselves nobody's tradition. When the company works in India, it's not returning to its homeland or to its source. It's going there to meet its colleagues. And I would actually go further that some of the most radical work within the classical Indian forms, it's happening in India, yes, but it's also happening here in the UK. And for me, the interesting question is what happens when these two bodies of work meet as equals? In practice for us at the company, this exchange takes shape currently in form of two programs. The first one is Roots International. It's a capacity building program for mid-career and advanced dancers in India. It extends Roots, which the company has run successfully in the UK for over 4 years now. And the point of extending it is precisely the argument that I have been making, that the company's training practice is not something that flows outward from UK as expertise to the subcontinent, that lacks it, but what Roots International offers to Indian dancers, especially the mid-career Indian dancers, is what artists everywhere are starved of: a structured development and international exposure, the producing and professional scaffolding around a mature practice. And the company learns as much from those dancers as it gives, which is what makes this an exchange rather than a delivery. The second work in the making is Pavan. It's a large-scale main stage work currently in creation with 10 dancers from India. And it would be easy to mishear this as an Indian cast performing a British company's work, but that's not what this is. It's actually the opposite of that. 10 Indian dancers are inside making the work from the beginning, being upskilled through the process, and the piece in itself is being built as a collaboration between the two countries, not just in terms of the skills, but also in terms of funding. So when Pavan tours, what it will be on stage is not UK's work with Indian labor in it. It will be a work that could not exist without both ends of the relationship. But I also want to be honest here on how exchange usually goes wrong, because I have watched it for the past 15 years from the receiving end. Extraction has a choreography, and it's easy to recognize. A company institution arrives, gathers material, gathers credibility, gathers photographs, and they leave. The knowledge always travels one way, the money travels one way, the credit travels one way. India usually appears in the program notes and nowhere in the budget. And I'll say this carefully because I think it implicates all of us. Diaspora organizations are not exempt from this pattern. Proximity to culture is not the same as accountability to it. And beyond representation from where I stand means exactly this: being accountable to the places your forms come from, in structure and in money, and not only in the sentiment. But what does that accountability look like in practice? 4 things. Artists and teachers in India are paid properly at the rates that respect their mastery and not their geography. Credit is structural in contracts and titles, not decorative, not thank yous. Commissioning runs in both directions. So Indian artists and companies are also making work through this relationship and not only contributing to ours. And training moves both ways, because the company's practices has things to teach in India and also a great deal to learn from there. And none of this is charity. It's what keeps the artistic conversation alive, because extraction eventually exhausts the very sources it depends on. Roots International and Pavan are both being built exactly on these 4 tests, and I would be glad to be headed to them. And this connects me directly to the panel's word, sustainability. A British South Asian company is only as sustainable as its relationship with the subcontinent. If the forms stop flowing, if the teachers stop teaching you, if the next generation of Indian artists see nothing in the relationship for them, the well then runs dry. So when I think about sustaining Akash Udivra Company, I'm not only thinking about Arts Council grant cycles, touring economics, though I do think about those constantly. I'm also thinking about infrastructure. And I mean that very precisely, because Akash's own career Akash's own career wasn't built on infrastructure. It was built by finding gaps at real costs. Most dancers' careers in India are also built exactly in the same way, because the training there is world class and the and the scaffolding around it barely exists. Roots International and Pavan are our attempts to change that. As a colleague put me to this this week, he said this isn't about legacy. This is about leaving something behind. It's about laying a path so that the next dancer doesn't have to tear down the thorns. And whether a dancer in Bhubaneswar, in Chennai, in Bombay sees this company as a part of their possible future, that's the test. If the answer is yes, the company has a future. And that's the version of sustainability I can contribute from my seat. The event we are today is called Interwaves. And I find that a very useful image because a wave isn't sent from one shore to another. It moves through the whole body of water at once. That's the relationship I'm trying to build. Not UK programming in India, not India supplying labor to UK, but one body of water moving. And I would generally welcome conversations about what accountable exchange with our source context could look like if we build it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Wasim. And over to you, Hal. If you could aim to keep it within 10 minutes, then I think we can still have 10 minutes pushed.
I think. Thank you. I think I'm gonna keep it extremely brief. So because I want to have enough time for us to have a bit more conversation. So for my section, predominantly I'm going to talk about Kakilang. For those who heard it before, I said it quite a few times in different occasions. But also I'm gonna say a little bit about the future directions of Kakilang. So in brief, Kakilang is history. It changed. Kakilang is an arts organization championing, advocating East and Southeast Asian arts and culture and community. Its history really going back to 2007. So actually, on next year will be our 20th anniversary. Start around London Chinatown by Westminster Councils, where they want to have some arts and culture initiative around. That's how we started. We changed the name a couple of times. It was first called Chinatown Art Space, and then I think in 2018 when we got MPOs, it changed to Chinese Arts Now. That's what we've been known to produce festival for like annually to biannually. And during the pandemic, we rebranded again called Kakilang. So there's a Fukien in Taiwanese, in many other languages means one of us. That also is a gesture that we want to move beyond or expand our remit from Chinese or Taiwanese or Hong Kong diaspora to more broadly East and South Asians communities in arts and culture. So we really, I think that one of the really strong identity to us is that we really champion interdisciplinary work, which means we are producing and commissioning performers, theatre, dance, interdisciplinary performances. We curate exhibitions. We do cabaret night, and we throw down a gig and party, and we launch many workshops. But I want to kind of like tie it back to the term East and Southeast Asian, because I think that obviously that term exists, but it was really heightened during the pandemic, as we all remember. There's a like huge of like Asian profile, hate crime, or violence and stuff. I feel like in a way that's good, that will be known, but also I feel it's really dangerous to homogenize this community, as we have so many culture, hierarchy, structure, geopolitical tensions, and very diverse. So, I mean, really, for me, the mission of Kakilang is to unpick those nuances, is to navigate through this landscape, and just really to show that kind of a delicate insight. So that's one of those things. And the second thing is, because I'm from sort of artist background, which I still make work these days, that was right. My capacity was really shrinking, but with this job. I think it's really as a creative, I often feel that in my career that often you have to, I don't know, like hyper perform your identity to enter certain resources, to access certain resources. So really for me, since I step into this role as being Kakilang or like leading Kakilang, I really want to find a way to champion a way to the point of like, you don't really need to feel like you have to do that. I mean, sure, like people practice naturally fall into that category or that direction. That's totally that we all support. But also, can I just like make a work in talking about heartbreaking? Is that also being support? You know, so there's that kind of things. I really want to champion, find a way to facilitate as well within the Kakilang's remit. And also, like we do a lot of like community engage workshop or championing in terms. I mean, when I say community, is talking about creative community and also like a poorly community speaking. You know, because in a way, like we have to recognize or cultivate our audience, also next generation's talents for that. Yeah, as I say, like I coming from really artistic background, which I still make work these days. So I mean, a lot of time when I make decisions or like reflecting what Kakilang should go, I often refer to myself 2 years ago before I joined Kakilang. We just really solely artists based in Bristol, barely make it, and don't have that much of access to the resource to organization. I asked myself at that time if my decision now will make myself at 2 years ago that position any better, or is that something where 2 years myself 2 years ago want to see Kakilang to go. So there's the two things I really want to push forward. One is regional engagement, as I was based in Bristol for 8 years, which most of the time I feel like the resources or assets really still pretty much London-centric. So we run many workshops around different regional cities, and also we have planned to go tour with the different projects. But also, like like we really want to facilitate that international conversation. This is part of it. This is coming from, I don't know, for many of us in the room, but whether you are the first-gen migrant, whether you are the diaspora community, that multi-layer of cultural understanding somehow can easily fell in sort of in-betweenness and get lost. But really I want to say, or want to champion, or want to flip that narrative is that actually in-betweenness is a strength. It's a strength that we can develop. It's a strength that, that it can be very, very exciting and have its potential for the future. So yes, so that is pretty much our thing. All tying back to Kakilang, even though it's really, it's still like driven by social impact, driven by this artist kind of activism sort of aspect. We should not forget the mission of art is to be inspired, to be reflected, to be connected, to push us forward, or to reimagine, but also to be relevant. So yes, that's me.
Thank you, Hal. Would you like to rejoin us on screen? Ah, there you are. I'll just do a quick observation and then maybe ask you a question each and then throw it out because we're getting a bit tight on time. So I think the strand that's running across all of your presentations and all of your work is that all four of you are offering artists and audiences an opportunity to meet each other beyond representation, which is really important and really exciting, and actually situated in the UK, actually really rare. And I think you were offering us some interesting provocations. So I was intrigued by Iskandar's comment, we flourish when we find community. And with Masoom, extraction has a choreography, and what version of sustainability can you contribute to from your seat? So I wondered whether you might like to expand on some of those provocations, or in fact ask each other a question, because it's actually quite rare that you get the opportunity also to have a conversation with each other as well as the people in the room.
I liked your presentation. That was really good. The visual of the wave is just so beautiful and sitting with me. What did I mean by we flourish with community? I guess if I frame that from a personal context, in many contexts, I am white passing, but culturally and ethnically not white. And I found myself, I grew up in a non-white context. I found myself in a really difficult place where I could not connect with the people that I was told were my peers. It was through the work of Kumiko Mendel, who some people know, who used to be the artistic director of New Earth, and other sort of makers or theatre practitioners of her generation that invited me into community spaces. It was only when I was permitted or felt myself being permitted or invited into those spaces that I could flourish artistically and be artistically brave and allow myself to have conversations about identity, my own identity, other people's identity, and to make work from a place of rawness and truth. I mean, I am fundamentally an artist. I'm still an artist. And like I said, accidental producer. So that's what I think I meant by that. And I guess what really struck me about Masoom's presentation was this conversation about extraction, and that does really sit with me. And the fact that we spend a lot of time in this country, I don't know why, but we really want to categorize people. So we do spend a lot of time going, this is the South Asian community, this is the East Southeast Asian community, even though that is an umbrella term in and of itself. This is the diaspora community, this is a first-gen migrant. Do you know what I mean? And I find those conversations sometimes useful, but also deeply painful and slightly reductive. So the idea that we're not working from a place of extraction, or if we're in international exchange, like when we were working with Joel in Singapore, that it flows two ways, I think is a beautiful provocation and critical for how we work with one another, especially across those two communities, I think, between East and Southeast Asian and South Asian communities. Just, we're slightly stronger together.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I completely agree with what you said about, categorizing people as identity politics. This is the first generation, and this is the Pakistani community, and then the Taiwanese community, and then, but you're also part of the South Asian community and the East Asian community. I do find it reductive. I also feel, to a certain extent, we ourselves are responsible for this. We have fed into the system to, in a way that it has led to us being divided on these lines. Because end of the day, it is work, it is art. And if a Taiwanese art speaks to me as an Indian, does it make it any less Taiwanese? No, it's just art, right? And when I said extraction has a choreography, I'd actually like to hear from the people in the audience. What I constantly see is that, and I can only speak in the Indian context, we have artists who come to India, they work with puppeteers in the local traditions, or they work with local forms, and more often than not, they are not compensated. They don't even know what their work is being used for. I see it happening over and over again with all Asian art forms, I would go to say. And I think there is something to sort of step back and look at and be like, what are we doing? Because these are your people at the end of the day. It's not us versus them. For me, it's still all the same. But yeah, I would love to hear from the audience.
Maybe because
Actually,
often
yeah.
when someone's
So-
online, they're not really part of the room. So I just wondered whether you had anything that you wanted to say or observe, Yuan.
I think for me, I think one of the main issues I always encounter is that I know so many people like you guys here, like all the people in the room, that we are trying to move beyond this categorization. But we often encounter a lot of issues that from the big venues, the gatekeepers, that they still want to put us into those categories. Like for those people who deal with Arts Council funding application or BFI funding application, you know how ridiculous those questions are. And I think it's also very important that we continue to do our work and trying to push that understanding towards maybe the decision makers. That's what I always find that's very important. Like, yeah, that's sort of the work we are doing here, is trying to also contribute to shape a different cultural policy within the UK as well, trying to move beyond that very old-fashioned way of labeling people. And yeah, that's just my thinking.
If I may, sorry.
Yes, please.
I don't live here. I don't work here. I come from Bangalore. I visit once in 2 months and I leave. But I've seen, I know of the funding cycles. We don't have this kind of funding back home. I think what would help us is to have people at the top level who are making decisions, being in these rooms, being part of these conversations. Because I find that I have these conversations a lot with people that I know here. But it's at the end of the day an echo chamber, you know. I don't know how many of us here have the power to change this policy or say stop categorizing us like this. Look at the world. And of course, it's a larger conversation outside of this panel, but I just feel like to have this conversation with people who actually have the power to do something would make a huge difference for this.
Do you want to?
I don't want to digress.
I was just going to speak on behalf of, thank you, on behalf of Kakilang, for example. I don't know where Liang is. I don't know whether Liang is in the room, but increasingly we're finding we're trying to build our visual arts program, and Liang and Hal have been working really hard to build relationships with institutions and not really getting a lot back. So our approach now is, well, we're just going to do it ourselves and set the agenda ourselves. And yes, we're an MPO, but yeah, we're just going to go ahead and do it and build our own context, even though we are in a privileged position as an MPO. And then I feel like people will actually be looking to us rather than us constantly looking to others for how things are possible. But yeah, over to you.
Just one kind of like, it's coming from my interest, or just one question perhaps for the audience, also for the panel here. With all the issues we're talking about, I would like to add the approach of time here and ask, because we all exist for quite a while, and I wonder what the things, like let's say 5 years ago, is different from is it now, as a similar topic we're talking about, right? Because I feel like, because I first encountered Kakilang when it's called Chinese Arts Now in 2018 and 19, I feel like what's the missions at the time is very different from what is missions now. I suppose that's reflect to what the landscape is now. So yeah, so I just, it's open question for everyone.
We've got questions from the floor. I'll just pass you the microphone and then maybe you could pass it on to the next person.
I just wanted to kind of follow from that discussion there. I did set up Kakilang way back in 2004 to 2027 when Westminster City Council wants a arts centre from that business essential initiative that they want to get rid of the Swiss art centre by building more business, and that initiative was actually led to their then Chinatown Art Space. However, I'm so pleased to see where Kakilang has been through that process to now. But I wanted to say, by following that discussion, is that you got to be there in that position to champion for what you wanted to do. However, I think England and London is such a diverse population, and no matter how you have been champion for the arts, I've been here since 1989. We are in the same circle. There's not enough cake for everyone wanted to share it, and the only way being champion for 30 years is still being categorized. Now, I think we have to just go beyond that, follow and work with the system and champion to what you wanted to do. And I think pretty much that's pretty much wearing on the producer's hat. You fight for it, you challenge with it, and if it did not work with a big cake, we continue to move on. And like what Ruth said, even though you are in MPO, even though you have been champion for this project that you wanted to do, you're not able to building into the partnership, but I don't think that's the end of the world. You do it yourself and they will look at you and they will support you. It's just a matter of time.
Really interesting conversation. Thank you very much. I'm actually very interested in asking Iskander, moving from producing or making work with specific and championing specific artists that you've known their excellence, moving into NPOs or institutions in a programming position that do no longer just serve or champion EC artists. How was the experience with in on the table basically? Like, do you feel it difficult to bring in discussions or raise interest in commissioning EC artists? Do you do that as in because they're great, or because they're great and it is a new audience that we should be expanding? Like, because you're in a double position where you are looking out for great artists and great work, but also sometimes on your shoulder, I don't know, maybe there is a burden that this group of this programming should involve whatever values that you're pushing forward, including the cultural contents that you champion for. Does that make sense?
Yes, the short answer to that is it's hard. Eileen and I have, been in long, engaged conversations, nuanced race dialogues around representation of different types of Asianness within My Neighbor Totoro, within arguably one of the largest subsidized organizations in the country. It's hard and it's tiring and it's exhausting. When I found myself in a larger programming position at Headlong, yes, the grassroots work that I was doing with independent practitioners and early career artists at Theatre 503, or these smaller venues that are critical for first steps. It's not so easy to take that piece of work from Camden People's Theatre and then upscale it to a main stage production at Leeds Playhouse with Headlong. That's actually not feasible. And that's partly because the infrastructure and the support networks for the growth of those artists didn't exist. So yes, I'm a big advocate for the practitioners that I've worked with. When I get into a programming room at Headlong, we can commission Joel Tan and we can commission AJ Yee. And obviously this is arbitrary to some degree, there's an artistic sort of flavor there. But there are artists that I'm not just able to uplift in that way. So there's steps missing. And so that's why I still think it's critical that we do the work that we were doing in those smaller venues. Hal was an artist that turned up in my inbox, and that's how we met. So do you know what I mean? So it was. The answer to your question is that burden, that responsibility still sits with me when I'm in those positions. I will do everything that I can to leverage those programming positions to have conversations, engage conversations about what that looks like. If it's not, okay, we can't offer a £10,000 commission to a playwright because the rest of the artistic programming team don't believe that that playwright is ready to take that step, which is a genuine sort of concern, then what are the structures or the infrastructure that's missing to get them to that space? And so how do we invest in those? So those are the conversations that I ended up having. And then where I can, I make, Moi Tran, the resident designer at Headlong. We've never had a resident designer, or we commission those writers. Do you know what I mean? Or Ming and I do whatever we can to inject as many Asian diaspora artists into the creative teams, or just the lists of creatives to AV check. I think that's answered your question. Yeah.
I think probably we.
Yep.
I think probably we could take one more question because we're pushing the time a bit, and then in the lunch break and other breaks, then we can obviously chat to people in more depth.
So I hope this is on. Thank you to the panel. I found this very interesting. I am an artist myself, but I guess as many of you can relate, I have parents who pressured me to get a real job. And so I also work in international climate policy, and I am really interested in the parallels that I see of what was once a fringe issue has now been really integrated into the economy, into getting not just public finance, but also increasingly more private finance towards climate, which I think involves a lot of the same issues that we're talking about: extraction, translating, the social value of things. And so I guess what I'm really curious to hear from you all is a similar question about funding, since I'm aware that in a post-Brexit landscape, the UK itself is cut off from a lot of the funds that it used to have access to. And this also has implications for visas, who can come here, who can work here, the extra costs of bringing artists to and from. So I know, again, this is all themes that you've all brought up. And I think, to me, the larger question here is also about the UK's place in the world, kind of in this landscape, and also as we increasingly talk about decolonization. But I guess what this all really boils down to is also what future planning and kind of what ways to support artists and programming that are you thinking about in an already challenging landscape, but what I can imagine is going to be even tougher. So any thoughts there would be really welcome. And if it's a longer conversation that we need to have over lunch, I'm happy to do that.
I will pass the mic to E. You are mute.
Because I like to complain about founders.
Oh yeah, well. Remember this is recorded. Yes, remember this is recorded. Later we'll go on public. But yeah, go on.
No, I do feel that it is very difficult, especially for festivals who want to do international works in the UK, that you are receiving less and less Arts Council funding, BFI fundings. For us, like what I mentioned, that we are trying to diversify in our funding streams. So we work with a lot of cultural organizations, whether they are based in the UK or abroad. For example, Japan Foundation, Korean Cultural Centers. We try to establish all sorts of connections with sort of like foundations that beyond arts and culture in a way community funds, which I would like to suggest everyone to look into that, which it's quite I think it's a funding that are still quite valuable for a lot of arts and cultural organizations who need a bit more funding. And I sort of don't know how to explain in a way, because I think in the UK it's quite green in terms of public funding. And I think another way we are trying to do is also trying to make sure we can balance our organization in a different way. So looking into different income streams as well, And I think that's just like personal.
That's very safe response. Yes. I would like to also add on a little bit so that we can just kind of wrap up here. But I think with this climate we have facing right now, I think collaboration is more than ever important. So that's why we are doing this here with so many organizations and so many delegates, and also with the support from Bulgaria Foundation, and also like with New Earth. I think this is our first time to do things together for. Yeah. Well, I don't know for how long, but I mean we hope that really send out a positive message to this community. And also, I mean, further to that, the skill of like communication, try to find things that align is really important. I couldn't say it's a general rules and structure of things how we should go for, because every time it's going to case by case, it's very specific. But I think that's the overall directions we're going to, is more talk to your partner, stakeholder, and find a way that we can work together. I think that's more than ever important. So yeah.
Thank you. Just to wrap up, I'd just like to say huge thanks to you all, our panellists, for bringing such care and your knowledge into the room. And thank you all also for joining us for this first panel.